My guest today is someone I've been meaning to interview for more than 2 years now. But of course, life, busy schedules, and work kept coming in the way. He has donned many hats in the corporate world, more often than not in an executive leadership role. But his most disruptive role, perhaps, has been in the music industry when he launched OK Listen more than a decade ago. And OK Listen is the first and only distribution platform in India back then. And it was truly a game changer for independent artists here. I truly believe this set off a chain reaction that helped not just the indie scene, but the music industry in India at large to evolve and actually catch up with the global music industry. So, without further ado, I'd like to shine the
Thanks,
spotlight on my
India. It's
guest, Vijay
absolutely been a
Basrur.
pleasure. Thank you
Thank you
so
so much
much.
for joining me today, Vijay, and welcome to Let's Talk Music. Great. Thank you for taking time out. I know you've not been keeping well, but it truly means a lot that you're here, and I can't wait to get started on our conversation because we've had we've interacted on Clubhouse, we've had like offline
Yeah.
chats, and there's been so much that you've had to share, and I think it would be unfair to actually sit on all that information by myself and not share it. So I think
Okay.
today's conversation is going to be like really interesting, and I'm sure everyone who's going to tune in will agree. So
Okay.
I'd like to dive right in if that's okay with you.
Sure. Absolutely.
Great. So like I introduced you, you've been in the corporate world for a while, and you've been in industries which are not the music industry. So I wanted to understand, what has your journey been like? How was that? How did that switch happen, and what led to the setting up of OK Listen?
Sure. So I think, fundamentally through my career, I've always been a music fan. And funnily enough, this is probably thanks to my dad, but I've always bought my music. I mean,
Oh, nice.
I've, I
Unlike a lot of
remember,
us.
yeah. So my first job, my salary was $3,000, and
Okay.
my first CD that I purchased was Hell Freezes Over by Eagles, which
Wow.
was,
Okay.
525 rupees at that point in time, which was probably like,
Yeah,
like
that's a lot.
about 15% of your salary, really, right? So,
Correct. Yeah.
uh, so the point is, so that is, and I've been a big music buff all through, right? But
Right.
always as a hobby and something more of like, actively listening to music always.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my corporate world took me through, primarily through a lot of startups, really,
Mm.
or businesses that were doing things very differently.
Mm.
So post my MBA, I joined, Bazi.com, which was
Oh,
eventually
wow. Yeah.
bought by eBay.
Yeah.
After working for Bazi, I worked for Inox, which is one of the first multiplex chains that launched in India in 2001.
Yeah.
After Inox, I spent about 3 years at Quicker. I was employee number 3 at Quicker. Again, it
Wow.
was a
Okay.
very new sort of area in the classified space, right?
Right. Right.
Uh, from Quicker, when I took a break, I actually joined a mobile gaming company,
Uh-huh.
which was actually working through a friend of mine.
Okay.
And it's here when I really sort of bumped into a problem that was existing in the independent music scene at that point in time. And this was around
Mm.
2011, I would say,
Mm.
where
Mm.
I actually discovered them clones,
Yeah.
on some website, and I wanted to
Mm.
buy some music from them clones. And when I
Mm.
reached out to them, they said, "Hey, look, we don't have any way to sell you the music, but we have a CD which we can VPP to you." And it was the first time I actually heard of this service called VPP, which was run by the postal department, actually.
Yeah. What is VPP again?
So VPP is basically like a cash on delivery sort of a concept. Today, cash on delivery, but
Okay.
it's just so it's like the postman comes to your house, you pay the money, and you get the CD, you get the
Oh my
package,
God. Oh
and the
wow.
postman then goes and gives the cash to the person who sent the package. So it's basically exactly like cash on delivery
Yeah,
today, right?
but government approved kind of cash
Yeah,
on.
so this was like in
Yeah.
2011. So I did that,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm.
they sent me the CD. I was not
Mm.
at home, and the
Mm.
CD went back.
Oh
And I was like,
no.
shit, this sucks. And
Yeah.
this can't be happening. So then
Yeah.
I started looking around and saying, okay, what are the options to purchase music online? Because I
Uh,
had done a lot of tech startups as such, and I was really curious, right? And
Yeah.
funnily enough, it turned out that there was nothing,
Hmm.
practically nothing in place.
Of course.
So, purely on a whim, and honestly, I didn't do a lot of research, because if I had, I wouldn't have started OK Listen, because the numbers just didn't add up. But I sort of felt that, hey, this is an interesting opportunity, and let me try and solve it. Really, right? So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
just on that whim, I then quit my job. I set
Hmm.
up OK Listen, and I
Hmm.
actually ended up going all the way to Ooty to attend the Mad Festival. Right?
Yeah.
Um, I think they had a couple of editions of it. And
Correct.
at the
Yeah.
Mad Festival, I met up with Indian Ocean, Raghu Dikshit, and a couple of these people. At that time, the indie
Yeah.
music scene was pretty chill, because the artists used to come down and chat,
Yeah.
things like that, really,
Kind of
right?
underground almost. Yeah.
Yeah. And I said, hey, look, here is what I'm thinking of. I'll set up something where you can sell your music to your fans, and you keep 70%, I keep 30%. Is that okay? They said, yeah, cool. I mean, we are on board, right?
Hmm.
And it also helped that one of my friends who was advising me was very good friends with, Indian Ocean at that point in time.
Okay.
So I just on that, so I put my own money, set up OK Listen, and we went live in July 2012,
Yeah.
as a beta, and then officially launched on August 15th. Um, we started selling music with about 7 bands, really, right? And so there was Indian Ocean, there was Raghu Dikshit, there was Vipin Mishra, there was Pragnya Vaklu,
Oh
and I think a
wow.
couple of more,
Okay.
really, right?
Hmm.
So I uh, we sold, I think, about some, I think, 2,000 rupees worth of music in the first 1 month, really, right? But what
That's
happened is
not.
that
That's actually. I mean, given those days, I think that's a pretty good
yeah,
number. I would
it
think.
was a good number.
Yeah.
And what happened is, I think Indian Ocean had earned about, I think, 650 rupees or something of that sort.
Uh,
And we just remitted the money into the bank account, really, right? And
okay.
so Amit Kilam actually he called me up and said, "Did you deposit money in our account?" I'm like, "Yeah,
Uh,
we sold music for you, and the money just, so whatever was due, put
yeah.
it in your account." So he was like, in about whatever 9-10 years of my career, this is the first time I've got money without following up. So it's very very unique, you know. I was like,
Yeah.
wow, that this must be really bad then. So he says, yeah, this is amazing. And that's how he then gave a shout out to us on Facebook. And that's how the whole journey sort of started.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, what we were doing was something very basic, but the
Yeah.
musicians had such low, levels of sort of, expectations from,
Expectation.
uh, that
Yeah.
anything which was normal was like,
Yeah.
wow, this is like the next thing since sliced bread, really, right? That kind of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how the journey started, and so that's how I got into the music industry, really. And the good
Yeah.
part was that I didn't know much about the industry, so I kept looking at it from a consumer perspective, kept looking at from
Mm.
the outside perspective. So it really helped, really, right?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
everybody whom I was talking to was very cynical about the music space, and it's true. At that point in time, music was a very sort of difficult industry at that point in time, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
everybody said that, hey, don't do this. It's you won't make it, and things like that, really, right?
Mm.
So that's how the OK Listen sort of journey started.
Mm.
And in 2014, we tied up with the Orchard, which is one of the largest
Yeah.
digital distributors of the world.
Correct.
And we were still paper download, really, right? We were not doing anything
Correct.
around streaming.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we tied
Streaming.
up
Yeah.
with them to be able to, give music to Amazon and Apple,
Mm.
which had download stores at that point in time. And
Okay.
so we did that, but in 2000, around, I would say end of 2014,
Mm.
I was looking at the end of my bank balance, and I was like, this shit is not working, right? So
Yeah.
I said, okay, you know what? Let's forget it, and let's
Mm.
like bail out, and I'll go back to a corporate job and shut down OK Listen.
Oh no.
So we
Mm.
wrote to a couple of artists saying, hey, look, I think this is not working out, and so we are thinking of quitting, right?
Yeah.
But
Mm.
we got an overwhelming response from most of our artists saying, guys, don't do it.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
whatever it takes. Try to, keep yourself around. But because you guys are doing some really good thing, but please don't shut down, because then it'll be the end of the world for us. Right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that really got us sort of, really sort of choked up. And so then what we
Mm.
did was that both me and my co-founder Bhavin, we went back to day jobs, right?
Mm.
But we kept OK Listen running. So it was like a sort of a side hustle. And
Hmm.
I, hired one young kid to sort of help us out with a lot of the, heavy
Hmm.
lifting and
Hmm.
things of that, really, right?
Hmm.
And then in 2016 on, I would say 2015 and onwards is when the streaming business started coming up.
Hmm.
And then, those opportunities started opening up.
Hmm.
And then we sort of pivoted towards saying, okay, you know what, you can put music up on OK Listen, but we'll
Hmm.
also help you put music on Spotify, Apple Music, all these places, right?
Yeah.
And that's how we sort of moved into the distribution space, really. And at that
Hmm.
point in time, like you mentioned, we were the only people doing it. So
Hmm.
organically, we got a lot of artists to come our way because, we
Hmm.
were the only ones helping them get off the ground.
Hmm.
And we kind of switched a little bit of business model. We said, okay, for streaming, we will just keep 15% because we were just doing the distribution, right? We were not
Hmm.
doing
Hmm.
anything specific. But we continue to keep 30% on the paper download store, really, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course, then, time will tell, the geo effect happened, streaming
Yeah.
exploded, and we are at a
Yeah.
point today wherein I think paper download is nearly dead,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
streaming pretty much has taken over.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that we've been very fortunate to be enough to work with a lot of independent artists, over the years.
Hmm.
But that's how sort of we moved into the music distribution space.
Great. And I mean, I was just like, while you were like, walking through how it started, I was just thinking of how, I mean, even my exposure to independent artists, it was just like limited to like a few names that you had heard, either because, I know like I had heard of Indian Ocean because of Black Friday and like, those kind
Right,
of
right,
association. It's still very like
right.
film industry centric. And
Yeah,
again, like you said, there was no place that you could actually listen to any of the independent music. It's not like you had streaming, and it's not like anyone was very active on YouTube, or
right,
it's just like a chance. Okay, there's a band performing and they sound really good, and we find out their name, and you like, there's no place that you can actually get their music anywhere. So
right.
honestly, that way, I think every independent artist today should know about this, and the role that OK Listen has actually played in bringing, changing that game entirely. So thank you, Vijay. I mean, I really
Oh,
mean this from the bottom of my heart.
all right. Thank you. Most welcome. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I know. It's been like a privilege, honestly.
Yeah. But so, I mean, I think safe to say you've actually seen the evolution of music
Hmm.
distribution in India. So, in fact, like pioneered it as well. So, what do you think has changed in the last, like maybe 10 to 15 years, specifically in the context of how things have changed after like Spotify and JioSaavn and all of them have picked up? And, like you said, this the geo effect. What do you think
Yeah.
has changed, and how has it impacted distribution specifically?
So I think what has happened. Thankfully, there's a lot more competition, right? So there is DistroKid, there is CD Baby, there is TuneCo, there is Horse. There are a bunch of people like us who do this distribution for independent artists, like primarily
Yeah,
because this is a system wherein the distributor does not take any copyright, just purely
correct. Yeah.
distribution, right? So there is a lot of competition, right? Also, I think what has happened is that I think it has sort of pushed distribution to like the lowest of the value chains right now, right? Earlier,
Mm-hmm.
it was a value add, if I were to use
Mm,
the word, but
mm,
now I think it's come to a point where probably it's moving to be commoditized. Right? It
mm,
really doesn't
mm,
make a difference. You
mm,
can choose whichever distributor you want. Because of the nature of the business, they have to let you go if you choose to, and they
mm,
have to let you come if you choose to, right?
mm.
So there is not as much of a competitive advantage purely in the distribution space. Now, of course, so that is leading to a little bit of, I think not little bit, quite a bit of innovation, even at each distributor level, whether you
Correct.
want
Yeah.
to innovate on either sort of, giving advances,
Mm,
using customer support as a big advantage, okay?
mm, mm,
Looking at global partnerships as an advantage. So there's a lot of, small things that distributors are trying to do to be able to
mm,
add value, you know?
mm, mm.
And I think it is needed because it's the first point at which a musician sort of engages with a business
Correct. Yeah.
to
Yeah.
start putting their music out, really, right? But what happens
Absolutely.
is that if that approach is very transactional,
Mm,
then they don't realize the importance of what is going through, or what is going
mm,
inside,
mm.
to just put their music out, right? It's very simple, right?
Yeah.
So therefore, the awareness about how important distribution
Mm,
is now very low, and
yeah.
we've seen artists make a lot of small mistakes,
Mm,
and which have a long term effect, and
mm,
things like that. So I think competition has increased. Uh, Options for artists have increased,
mm.
and yes, like I said, I think distribution has become, or is moving towards becoming, a little bit commoditized right now.
Okay. Could you, I mean, if you don't mind, could you elaborate on that bit which you said, there are certain things which maybe artists are not paying enough attention to at the distribution level, which has a long-term impact. So does it, you think, if I'm not mistaken, does it have anything to do with metadata, how royalties are collected, those kind of things?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So what happens is, for example, it could be a thing like, an artist has put out, uh, has, let's say, we've had some issues. I'll give an example. There's an artist who
Mm,
set up an account on DistroKid,
mm,
put out the music, right?
mm, mm,
And put out one track,
mm,
and has sort of forgotten about the whole thing for the next 6, 8 months,
mm,
right?
mm,
Um, and these happen to be artists, who do something,
mm.
just from a sort of a urge of doing it, and then take it on seriously a little bit later, for example, right?
Huh, okay,
Now,
yeah.
if you're serious about it, I think people, and of course, I think today artists are far more knowledgeable,
Yeah, yeah,
and they are a little bit more careful, because there's a lot of education, awareness, there's content which they can read, all of that stuff, really, right?
yeah.
I'm looking at maybe around a 2, 3, 4 year back sort of a timeline where artists used to make a lot of mistakes, really, right? So you
Mm,
would have
mm,
put out music on DistroKid,
mm,
forgotten about it, you
mm.
lost that access, your content is gone, right?
Right.
But you have not taken your UPC, ISRC, you don't have the information, so you have to start from
Yeah,
scratch.
from
And
scratch. You
then
lose
what
those
happens is
streams.
you lose those streams, and
Yeah.
and things of that, really, right? So uh, or you end up trying out multiple distributors, like you try one for one track, second for one track, third for one track, and then you can't sort of really manage it. It becomes a little
Mm,
difficult. You don't know from where royalties are coming in, and
mm,
so it
mm.
just becomes a little convoluted, and then they eventually have to struggle to sort of put that under one roof, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think especially, I mean, I've worked with artists who've had like problems like this, people who have uploaded music or maybe like, maybe even something as short as like 5 to 6 years back, or they've used
Hmm.
a service which was maybe not cookie and something which was available outside and not accessible
Yeah, yeah,
to the Indian audience at that point in time. And absolutely no idea as to what is a login ID, like basic things. They don't even know what name they've probably given as an artist name, or
right,
is it the legal name that they've provided. And all of
right,
this actually ends up with, we know the song is by that particular artist, but are you making money out of it? If you're making money out of it, where's the payout? Who's collecting it? And why haven't you
right.
seen anything? All of those are questions which I think now, like you said, I think the new age in the last couple of years, people have become so much more conscious of how to go about doing this, and they want to be thorough from day one, which is great. I mean, I'm not complaining at all.
Right, right. Yeah, even today, on that note, today also we have about, I would say, um, 10 to 15% of our artists
Mm.
who have just disbanded, you know,
Yeah.
and we are continue to collect money for them, and it
Mm.
just sits with us, and we
Mm.
don't know where to give it to, you know. But as a business, we have to keep
Mm.
accounting for it, right?
Correct.
Because the bank account is shut. Those guys have migrated, gone to a different country,
Oh
The social
dear.
media accounts are inactive, but the music is playing, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah.
Oh, I want to get back to this because this is like the conversation about money left on the table. And this is
Yeah.
exactly one of the examples. I mean, there are other instances as well. But I
Yeah.
just, before we get into that, I just want to like kind of break it down in terms of like, how does revenue distribution work in terms of like, how do you determine which streaming platform pays how much? And like, Does each distributor have a separate commercial arrangement with each DSP, or as in how does that work? If obviously without having to give away any confidential information, but if you
Yeah,
could
yeah.
just throw some light on how that works, it'd be really helpful.
Yeah, so I think there are two parts here. One is, of course, how does the streaming service provider decide to pay, right? Now,
Correct.
those
Yeah.
are different parameters. So I think a couple of the bigger parameters are around the fact that which country is the subscriber from, right?
Mm.
Is he a paid subscriber or is he a free subscriber? Okay.
Mm. Mm.
And if he's a free subscriber,
Mm.
how much of his music has been monetized through ads or how much
Mm.
of it has been not really, right? So for
Mm.
example, uh, you could be a you could be a free subscriber sitting in India
Mm.
on Spotify,
Mm.
and there could be a bunch of your content that you listen to.
Mm.
When there are ads playing, there are
Mm.
only Spotify ads playing. And say, because
Mm.
sometimes when you're listening to ads,
Ah.
you get to see, you get to hear a Spotify ad only, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
at times you will nowadays you will get to see a lot of, like, a lot of other ads. You'll get to hear a lot of like proper regular advertisements, right?
Branded ads. Yeah. Yeah.
Brand, yeah. So therefore, based on that, it sort of, that's their first sort of level of deciding from a consumer side, depending on the
Mm.
consumption. And the second, of course, is on through which partner is this music coming to, right? And it is true that
Ah.
there is a certain value uh, per stream that is
Mm.
allocated depending on the partner. So it's definitely the fact that a
Mm.
DistroKid and a CD Baby and a TuneCore and a OK Listen and a
Mm.
Horus or whatever, they would
Mm.
have very different rates
Mm.
negotiated with each streaming service, depending on either, I mean, this could be a direct conversation with the
Mm.
streaming stores, or it
Mm.
could be via any large partnership that they are sort of riding on, for example, right? So we ride on
Oh,
Orchard's partnership with the
equation with
streaming
their
stores, right?
partnership. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
TuneCore, I think, in parts rides on the Believe partnership, right?
Mm. Mm.
So therefore, there are like a lot of these, intermediary vehicles also,
Mm.
and I think it's a function of uh, how much content is being provided by the
Mm.
aggregator, and how much of it is sort of being consumed really, right?
Mm.
How much of
Mm.
it is
Mm.
being used by the customer. So in fact, I think there was, in between, there was this whole talk about the fact that labels feel that they should get paid a little bit more than what independent musicians get, because label content is actually what is driving consumption. So
Mm.
label content is what pulls people to streaming stores, and they eventually then also listen to independent artists, right? So there is a lot of debate around whether all music is of equal value, or
Mm.
there
Oh dear
is
Lord.
music that is whatever. There is a debate there, but I think
Yeah.
this part from a payout perspective is just a pure function of, you know, I think the volume of content and how much of sort of
Mm.
value it
Yeah.
is to the streaming store, right?
So
And
supply demand mechanics basically.
yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, something like that.
So I wanted to come back to that point on money left on the table. Like, you said when bands are defunct, or, there are artists who are not performing anymore, like no longer in connection with the platform. What happens to revenue that is generated for artists who are, or bands that are defunct? What goes on there?
So see, unfortunately, what happens is if that money is not claimed for like 3-4 years,
Hmm.
then it's like it becomes a financial decision, really, right?
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
it it loses any sort of sentiment towards that money on the table, really, right? So
Yeah.
what we've done at OK Listen is
Hmm.
that we pumped that back into, let's say, doing some marketing or some promotions or giving a grant or supporting
Ah.
artists or things like that. So what we've done is that we said, okay, this is money that's not ours,
Yeah.
so we will put it back into the system.
Yeah.
So
You can't declare
uh,
that as profit, obviously.
yeah, I mean, I could declare it. I mean,
Yeah.
financially, there's nothing stopping me from
Stopping you from doing it. Yeah.
declaring, saying, okay, this is income for me, right?
Yeah.
So, but what we've done is that in like if we have 100 rupees on the table, maybe we've declared income of like, maybe it's okay, there is income of 10 rupees or 15 rupees or whatever.
Mm.
But I would say majority of it is always we've put it back.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
the putting
yeah,
it back is, supporting like maybe a college festival or supporting, or whatever. We put it back into the ecosystem,
yeah.
But I think this could start becoming a bigger problem
Mm.
um, if if artists become very frivolous about their careers.
Mm.
This could become uh, very very interesting because like we've known, there are so many artists now coming in. I
Yeah,
don't think all of them will survive, right?
correct.
So therefore, if there are, let's say, whatever, 10,000 artists, for an example, coming in, let's say this month, I'm guessing, more than 7,000 will not survive for more than a year and a half or 2 years.
Mm.
But their music will be there on the streaming stores. They'll
Mm.
continue to earn money, maybe a little bit here and there, maybe like, $100, $200, $500. But
Yeah,
for an aggregator, that adds up.
that
And
adds
then
up. Correct. Yeah,
they sit with a lot of value,
yeah, yeah.
so it could get very interesting as to what these numbers will look like 10 years from now. My guess is that those numbers will be fairly large,
Hmm.
you know
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting and good to know also because I think I've had a lot of, actually, I've had clients ask me about this as well. So it will be good
Hmm.
to know this, how this works from a distribution perspective. And obviously,
Yeah.
like from a performing royalties perspective, that's a mechanical royalty. That's like a completely different,
Right, right,
like
right.
ball game. But yeah,
Yeah.
great. So I mean, just to get this like into perspective, in terms of like now, for example, in India, I know that though globally maybe Spotify controls like a majority of the streaming revenue or like the streaming industry as such. In
Hmm.
India, it's not as much. I mean, maybe a Geo7 or a Ghana probably has like a bigger stake in the pie. So, um, I mean, does it make sense that if you're working with someone who's a local distributor, you'll probably have a better deal? Like, does that make any difference, or is it, just about like you said, like the brand value and the fact that you have like these big partnerships and you have those associations that will determine these
Yeah,
prices?
yeah. I don't think going with a, I mean, yeah, you need to really choose as to which distributor you need to work with, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You need to be aware of how much value is this distributor giving you. So
Mm,
to give you a sense that maybe the lowest end of the spectrum
mm,
could be around 2 or 3 paise a stream, and the highest end of the spectrum could be anywhere between 7 to 8 paise a stream, right? Uh, so the point is that that spectrum could lie anywhere, right? Depending on which partner you go to.
yeah,
So you, as an artist, need to be aware. Okay, actually, you know what? Which spectrum is this distributor playing? Like the distributor may not be able to tell you exactly the price per stream because
correct.
it's also a function of, like I said, the parameters of how each of these distributors, each of these streaming stores calculates the payout, really, right, based on the subscriber profile and things like that. But it will help artists to really understand at which spectrum the distributor also lies, you know,
Mm,
along with the subscriber profile of that artist, of that streaming story, right?
mm, mm.
And I think one thing that keeps getting missed is a fundamental problem that I think the entire Indian music industry is trying to address is the fact that Indian consumers on streaming stores are just not paying,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I think that is the core problem, which
Mm,
then sort of moves towards the fact that people will always look at, I mean, artists essentially will always say that, hey, I'm getting such a small payout from streaming stores, really, right? But
mm.
the streaming store also has to really generate that money from somewhere. And today the situation
Correct.
is that they are not able to generate money from consumers. So, which
Mm,
means a lot of the money that goes out is coming through their own pockets, right? And
mm,
I think that is what slowly and steadily is will have to change,
mm.
and that will be for the better. But it will involve a little bit of friction and a little bit of
Yeah, for
pain
sure.
in the next couple of years, right? So
For
I know
sure.
you heard like Ghana has now moved to a completely paid model, right? They don't have
Yeah.
a free tier at all,
Don't
right?
have a treater at all.
So
Yeah.
obviously the numbers would have taken a dive and things like that. But
Mm.
what would be interesting to see is that if they can survive purely on the paid audience, and if they can, I think then that will be something very interesting to see. And the other
Yeah.
streaming stores will probably then want to experiment that might be the way to go, right? Or at
Yeah.
least have a healthy mix, you know,
Right.
because I think globally they are at about like 45, 55. Spotify is about 45% paid and 55 free.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting because I mean, and like actually, I have like a bunch of questions, related questions in terms of like one that you mentioned record labels and that there is that whole conversation about them getting paid more or that they need to get paid more because it's their catalog that pulls the users to these platforms. But that said, do these record labels have direct relationships with DSPs which determine how they get paid? Because I mean, obviously, they don't use a distribution service like an independent artist would. I mean, okay? Let me rephrase that question. How do record labels distribute their music on these
No.
platforms?
Yeah. So there are services like similar to what we do. So for example, like
Like
Orchard
Orchard, okay, huh?
is a very big. Their biggest business comes by servicing labels,
Labels,
right?
understood.
So
Okay,
there is In Grooves, which is also I think a part
yeah,
of I think Universal. I guess I'm not very sure. So everybody
right, yeah,
has. I mean, they have to use somebody to be able to deliver the music
correct.
to the streaming stores, right? So, for
Streaming
example,
stores, yeah.
I know that Times Music also uses Orchard, right?
Mm-hmm.
So while they do that, you know, the big three, if you look at Warner, UMG, and Sony, right?
Mm.
All of these have investments in Spotify, for example, right? So they will have direct relationships from a content promotion, engagement perspective, really, right? But from a
Mm.
distribution perspective, they will always go through somebody else's pipe. So labels don't have a direct pipe to streaming services.
Yeah, but I don't know. I find that a little like unethical to a certain extent because I mean you're
Hmm.
basically saying that I have stake in an avenue which is going to be streaming most of my songs, and I also make money out of the same thing. As in, it's like it's kind of. I mean, I don't know if you have seen the playlist on Netflix, which is about
Yes.
Spotify.
Yeah.
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 So the last episode basically talks about this, right? Like, the fact that, you have major labels who have a stake in a streaming platform, and
Hmm.
then, you kind of like take all the rights of the artist, and then they therefore making money out of the streaming, not really paying the songwriters anything.
Right.
So, which brings me to the next question. We don't really have any minimum amount that needs to be paid, right? There's no, as I mean, in India, we don't have any regulations which say that, okay, as a streaming service, this is the amount that you need to be paying on a minimum basis to these rights holders, and defining that, okay, recording rights, or person who owns master rights is entitled to X amount, publishing rights is entitled to X amount. That's not there right now. And the US has come out with like a mandatory 15% now,
Hmm.
basically saying that there is a statutory requirement for streaming services to actually pay the songwriter a certain amount. I just wanted to
Hmm.
understand, or like just get your perspective on it. Like, do you think, I know it's going to be very difficult to get through to that stage in India, but it is going to happen. It will happen at some point of time. But what do you think about this? Do you think it makes sense, especially given that you talked about how a lot of the services, especially like distribution services, you end up, dipping into your own pockets to like pay out. So how will this impact the distribution industry?
So I think this is I think less according to me this is less of a distribution problem, right? This
Mm,
is I
mm,
think is more of a systemic problem, and that's why
correct.
the government has to come in and sort of enforce some of this stuff because they have to protect rights of
Yeah.
the other stakeholders in the industry, really, right?
Yeah.
So, I think in India, IPRS is trying to do that,
Mm, mm,
trying to you know, lobby for the rights of, songwriters and, composers and things like that, really. So IPRS is trying to do that part. And from a legal perspective, I think they are still like the only body that is allowed to do that. So they have the right to do it. And the way they do it is to have streaming services pay them a certain, like a license fee or a royalty
Yeah,
fee,
royalty, performance
which
royalties. Yeah.
at which they then break up into the rights holders, and it's their responsibility to pay out to the rights holders, right? So the thing happens there is that if you are not registered with IPRS, then you will never see the light of the
Can
day.
you
You will
miss it?
never see the money, right? So I think
Exactly.
it's like a complex thing wherein, so in this piece, I think the distributor has very little to play, right? Because the money is not flowing through the distributor.
Correct.
That part of the money actually I think is flowing through the publishing ecosystem, really, right?
Right. Right.
And that has to then work with the local, collection societies that have to be able to, take that representation from the body that is allowed to do that and then
Right.
distribute it, right? And that's why it
Correct.
needs a little bit of government intervention and things like that. I think we IPRS is doing some very interesting work in that area. But the challenge has been that I think here in India, there is this lot of fight between streaming services not paying that royalty to or the license fee to IPRS, and
Yeah.
whereas the
Yeah.
others are doing it. So I think it's a little bit of uphill task, but I think eventually it will get there because I think the ecosystem is now growing,
Correct.
and there are enough right holders and other people who are themselves becoming bigger. It's not earlier. What was happening is that the labels controlled everything, right?
Yeah.
Now I think there's a significant amount of people who are aware of their rights, and that number is increasing. So therefore, I think IPRS will now be wanting to do something which is in the favor of the rights holders anyway.
Correct. So yeah. So I'm just like my mind is just like spinning with a lot of the
Sure.
questions that I'm like, I have maybe not necessarily related to distribution, but also like in terms of the fact that even the rates that are like fixed between like a distribution service and a streaming service platform.
Hmm.
We don't have any regulatory intervention there. Do you think that is something which requires regulatory intervention because to bring
So
some kind of
I mean, my personal opinion would be that there cannot be, and I don't think even globally there is a
no, no,
precedent to
no.
this, right? And that's also because it's like a business decision, you know.
Correct. Yeah.
It's like saying a company should be mandated to pay a certain amount of dividend every year to their shareholders. It's nearly impossible, right? Because the dividend is a function of how much profit they make, how much their business grows, and the business grows depending on certain parameters and things of that, really, right? So
Yeah.
I feel that it's unlikely we will see a minimum threshold of payout that's mandated by a government body, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think one thing that is what is there, and that we've seen like an amazing amount of transparency around with all streaming stores, is that even if you have even if your song has been heard 5 times, and assuming, let's say, your rate is, let's say, 2 paise per stream, for example, right? You will get that 10 paise, right? So that much of granularity in terms of reporting and in terms of payment
Yeah.
has been established, right? So
Yeah.
the threshold is very good, and all streaming services are complying to it. There is a spectrum at which each streaming service operates in terms of compliance, which means some of them will report data and pay you on a T-1, like a month, like
For the
if you're
preceding month kind of
for
thing.
the
Yeah.
month. Some
Yeah.
operators might give you like 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, whatever, depending on how they are performing as a business, really. But that part is there. That has been established, and I don't think no streaming service is going away from the fact that they won't pay. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Um. So, but there's also like that whole thing, right? About they're not really like tracking payouts until it hits a certain number of streams. So how does that work? Like, obviously, like if you're saying that there's transparency in terms of reporting, these are the number of streams you receive. And
Yeah.
this, I guess, happens at the distribution platform level. That's like, that's where the artist has visibility into which streaming platform is playing which track
Yeah.
of theirs at,
Yeah.
at how many numbers.
Yeah.
So, when we're talking about like the distribution platform, then paying the artist for a certain number of streams, it's obviously not going to be like per platform, right? It's going to be like an aggregate. You've received an
Yes.
aggregate streams across these many platforms, and we are paying you basis that, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And so
But
then,
sorry, go ahead.
but no, so my question over here is more about like, if you have a certain rate which you have agreed with, if the distribution platform has a certain rate which you have agreed with each streaming platform, then how does that work? Like, does that change when you're paying it out to the artist? Is
No,
like
no,
a
no. No,
okay,
it's the way this is operating is, let's say, for example, I am company X and I'm talking to Spotify. I'm a distributor, for example.
okay,
So suppose you're setting up a new distribution company, right?
yeah,
And you don't have anybody else to ride on. And let's theoretically assume that you are going to an Apple and a Spotify saying, hey, I want to be able to give you music. And can you ingest music from me and pay me as per whatever rate that we agree to? So the aggregator might ask you, so the streaming store might ask you, how many musicians are you gonna bringing in, right? What
yeah,
kind of music are you gonna bring in, right? So suppose you say, okay, I'm gonna bring in Indian classical music, for example, right? And I have 50,000 or 2 million artists, for example. I have like a massive database, right? We'll say, okay, cool. We'll agree to give you, let's say, 3 paise per stream. I'm just saying, like, they may agree with you. Basis whatever,
yeah,
3 paise for a paid user, maybe 2.5 paise for a free user, and maybe
okay,
2 paise for a free user who is not being monetized by us.
okay,
Whatever. I mean, there could
yeah.
be a
These
broad,
are all
those parameters
examples.
that
Yeah,
they'll agree to, right? Now,
yeah,
once
yeah.
that is agreed to, then the reporting is set, and then you just ingest your catalog, and every month or every whatever cycle that they report data, they will say, okay, you know what, your catalog of 2 million artists, and whatever 10 million songs got this much of streams, and this is what we owe you. Here's the money, right? So you collect that money, and then you say, okay, who is this money for? This money is for of the 2 million artists that I have, only 50,000 artists actually music got streamed in this month. So I'm going to divide that money between these 50,000 artists, keep my commission or whatever my business model is, and then pay the rest to the artist.
Okay, hold on to that. You said divided among those many artists. So you're saying if you have, say, you have like 50,000 artists who are on your distribution platform, which are therefore plugged in playing on all these streaming platforms. Maybe out of those 50,000 artists, 1,000 of them are really popular.
Yeah.
And are, generating majority of the streams.
Yeah.
So then how does that work? So are you saying that say I'm an artist who has not received like more than 500 streams on like the music that I have played?
Yeah.
On what basis are you paying me then? If you're going to divide that, it's
No,
going to be obviously
no,
based on.
it's basis your number of streams. So if you have done 500 streams, you will get money worth 500 streams. If you have done 50 billion streams, you will get money worth 50 billion streams.
Okay.
So basically, the data comes as per ISRC UPC, right? So we know exactly which artist, which album,
correct.
which asset has earned so much money,
Earn so
and that's
much
how we
money.
distribute
Correct.
it. So therefore,
Yeah.
our active payout artists every quarter, because we pay out every quarter, keeps varying. Like, because some artists don't get heard in a quarter, but some artists get heard in a quarter, right? Of course, our top 200, I would say top 500 artists always remain the same, but there is always a flux between the long tail that of the artists are there.
Yeah. Understood. So that brings me to this whole discussion on like user or like user-centered royalty payouts, right? Like for example, what about, I think that I can't remember the name of the platform, but there is a platform which basically pays you based on the number of people who've heard you specifically.
SoundCloud does that.
SoundCloud does that. There's another
Yeah.
one as well. I've just read it like 2 days ago. But how did that work then in this context? Isn't that
So
like
see,
really like hard to calculate?
yeah, it's a little tricky. It's a little tricky. So what they are doing there is that, suppose you're a musician and I'm
Hmm.
listening to your music, right? So
Yeah.
what they do there is that if I have paid 100 rupees per
Hmm.
month to SoundCloud, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
SoundCloud will say, okay, of the 100 rupees given by Vijay,
Hmm.
and suppose Vijay has spent whatever, has heard a billion streams, for example,
Hmm.
right? Of
Hmm.
those billion streams, how much of them are Sandhya streams, right?
Oh.
And
Hmm.
if Sandhya has got, let's say, half a billion, for example,
Hmm. Hmm.
then Vijay's 100 rupees, 50 rupees will go to
50
Sandhya.
will come. Hmm.
So it is a direct correlation between the artist and the user, right?
Hmm.
So, but it gets a little tricky because sometimes it's highly possible that, I mean, there is
Chances of
at a very
manipulation?
broad, not really, at a very broad level. Uh, okay, I think the challenge in user centric stuff is that if a user listens to your music, like if you have a finite set of users who listen to your music a lot,
Yeah.
then your payout will not increase over time. You know,
Why
it's
though?
like, okay, so this is a little tricky because I also don't understand it in detail, but here's what I'm trying to sort of think through
Yeah,
this a
yeah,
little bit,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So if 100 people listen to my music, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, what happens, I think, is in streaming stores, like conventional streaming stores,
Hmm.
that 100 will keep on increasing a lot, right?
Correct.
Now, here what happens is if these 100 people, I
Hmm.
have a finite amount of money to give you. I'm paying X amount of money, right? And
Oh
again,
yeah.
with SoundCloud, what happens is that the free people are not get. I mean, you're not getting money from free people,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right?
Correct.
So
Yeah.
if there are say 200 people listening to your music, and
Hmm.
I'm not sure whether SoundCloud allows you to consume
Music for
music as a
free.
free user, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Let's assume they don't allow it, which means your number of users listening to your music is less, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
what happens is now 100 people will give X amount of money per year, right? So your pool is
Correct.
limited, right? Now
Yeah.
what you're saying is that my music is going to be heard by these 100 people.
Hmm.
So my pool is finite. And so even if the consumer goes and listens to my music infinitely, I will
Hmm.
only take a share of how much of his pool. Suppose he has paid 100 rupees per year, then of that
Hmm.
100 rupees, if my consumption of music is 50 rupees, then
Hmm.
my payout is 50, right? So because the user has paid 100, of which his consumption mine is 50%, so I'll get 50. So I think it is limited to the fact that A, it is a paying user,
Correct.
and B, your pool is finite, right? But the advantage is you are getting money from the people who are listening to your music.
Listening to you, yeah. But then
That's
we're
what it
also
is.
looking at it as, now say I'm an artist who has just started and I'm becoming, like, I have increasing popularity over the years. So that directly affects us, right? Like obviously, like say I have done X number of shows in this year and therefore my pool of listeners has gone from 100 to 250, and that's only going to keep increasing because I have become more popular. So then this makes sense for me.
Absolutely. And I think so that is what happened. And remember that those new fans you're acquiring,
Yeah.
they have to be willing to pay to listen to your
Correct.
music, right?
Yeah.
So it also puts a lot of emphasis on the artist
Artist
to
to actually grow.
continuously
Yeah.
grow their
Generate.
fan base, right?
Yeah.
And ensure that fan is
Mm.
willing to put out money from his or her pocket, to be able to listen to your music, right?
Mm.
So that artist to fan connection
Mm.
becomes even more solid, and uh, artist to fan in terms of from a monetizable perspective.
Correct. And I feel like the only, like, the screw up over here in terms of like how it would interact with the other networks is that maybe I have a SoundCloud subscription. I also have a Spotify subscription. I'm not going to listen to the same artist on both platforms. Like in the sense, if I can listen to them on Spotify, I just stick to Spotify. Unless I am a, completely loyal SoundCloud listener and, consume all my music only on that platform. Because otherwise it doesn't make sense, right? Because
No,
why would
absolutely.
I?
So
It's
yeah,
like, yeah.
some of these platforms are, I think, trying to ride on the fact that while we are a streaming service,
Mm,
we are they are positioning themselves to be a streaming service for the core fans,
mm.
like how Bandcamp is, right? Now,
Yeah,
a
yeah,
lot of
yeah.
the Bandcamp music, of course, a lot of the Bandcamp music, Bandcamp artists choose
Mm,
not to put their music on streaming stores,
correct.
right?
Yeah,
Some of them do both. They put it up on Bandcamp and also on
yeah,
streaming stores, really, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
if today, for example, you have music on Bandcamp and on streaming stores, then what will
Mm,
happen is that only your core fans will go and buy it on Bandcamp.
correct.
Rest, your all your fringe fans will say, okay, screw it, I'm not going to pay 100 rupees for the album. I'll go and listen
Yeah.
to it for free on Spotify.
In quotes free because,
Yeah, whatever. I mean, the
yeah,
consumer is not paying.
consumer
Yeah.
not
But
paying. Yeah,
and
correct.
also what the artist will get paid will be a
Mm,
pittance compared to what the artist will earn from Bandcamp.
true.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, if I'm looking at a transaction, one album purchase on Bandcamp gives the artist a lot more money
Mm.
than, like I would say 10,000 streams
1,000 streams
on
on, yeah,
Spotify. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
that
yeah.
way. Yeah,
Absolutely. Lot of math. Anyway,
yeah.
but coming back to something which I really wanted to get your opinion on.
Hmm.
And it's a favorite topic of mine and like a favorite rant of mine also about record labels. But I just wanted to get your opinion on how you think, now the fact that we have all these independent distribution services, starting with, okay, listen, CD Baby, TuneCore, DistroKid, all of these guys, it's actually, I mean, because record labels historically had and had a control on distribution, which
Hmm.
on and all these distribution services have changed that game.
Hmm.
Um, so, I mean, technically, and without taking any rights, it's just basically offering an artist, here, this is what I'm providing. You just pay me a commission or a fee or like a one-time fee, and your music is out there. Because that's what record labels used to do for these artists. How
Hmm.
has that changed the industry? I mean, not just in India, but like what has been your experience, and what have been your uh,
See, actually, the more and more more time I've spent, right?
yeah, yeah,
Uh, you start to understand the nuance of how much a record label does,
mm,
for the artist, right? I mean, for the popularity of the artist. See, I think
mm,
at a very broad level, it's easy to say that record labels are evil, right? And I think, if you look at it from a point in time,
mm,
at a point in time where uh, I would say, let's say 10, 15 years back, yes,
mm,
they were evil. I agree, and even from a objective standpoint. But the
uh,
thing is, at those points, there were no
yeah,
alternatives available, right?
correct, yeah.
For anybody to say, okay, this is evil, but then what is the alternative? There was
What is
nothing,
the
right?
alternate? Yeah.
There was nothing, and therefore that evil was probably was heightened
Mm,
because of the fact that it was nearly a monopoly, really, to a certain extent, right?
yeah,
But if
yeah,
you
yeah.
if you sort of turn to today, I feel
Mm,
that uh, labels are doing a lot to be able
mm,
to be able to promote an artist, right? And they
mm,
have their ways and means of doing it.
mm,
And if you ask any independent music today, and this hasn't changed, if you ask me, right? If I were to
mm,
ask an independent artist this
mm,
5 years back or 8 years back or even today, if I say,
mm,
hey, here is an
mm,
opportunity to
mm,
go and sing in a movie soundtrack as a playback
mm,
singer,
mm,
or hey, there is a label who's willing
mm,
to sign you up, right?
mm,
Any artist will just go blindfoldedly into it. Okay. That of course there are a few who will not do, but that number is very small, right? Because that is the sort of holy grail for a lot of artists. That if I get to sing in Bollywood, I will make it, right? Or
Yeah, yeah.
if I get a label deal, then I have arrived, really, right? So it has always been that thing which defines, are you a big artist or not, right? That kind of a thing, right? So we've seen a lot of artists get starry-eyed about getting signed by a label, even if it's for
Yeah.
one song, right?
Yeah.
So I feel that what is actually, if the way I look at it is that the work for the labels has become a little easier right now.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, because a lot of the DIY platforms today, all the artists are going there because they believe that I don't need to go to a label from day one.
Correct.
And the labels, the larger labels are scanning the landscape, right?
Correct.
And what they do is, if they see interesting talent, is when they will try and say that, hey, you know what, I'm going to take a bet on this talent, right? And then they have this ability to then use their ecosystem, whether it is, their promotion partnerships with streaming stores. Okay. Because they work a lot with streaming stores directly to be able to promote some of the content on the platform. All of that then allows you to sort of, give them, uh, uh, give the artists a much bigger canvas to play with, really, you know. So just to give you an example, I think I was just checking this yesterday or day before, right? So there is this Fresh Finds India, right?
Yeah.
You should look at it, called Fresh Finds India Best of 2022, right? All the top, a lot of those
On Spotify.
tracks in that on Spotify, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of those tracks have eventually been purchased by labels,
Yes.
right?
I'm
So
aware of this.
Fresh Finds is something where you're looking at new artists, new sounds, but labels have said, okay, this is an interesting artist, this is an interesting track, let me take it, right? And you will see that those songs have really gone much, much wider in terms of reach.
After the purchase, you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been I mean, unfortunately, we have not been able to track it, but we've seen uh, uh, songs which have debuted on Fresh Finds, with songs that have been of artists who are cover of Fresh Finds, right? Sitting there for a week as the first song on Fresh Finds, and not hit more than 50,000 streams, right? So it's very sort of subjective as to how many streams. So there's no guarantee that if you're on Fresh Finds, you will hit like 1 million plays, right?
Yeah.
But it's possible that something went viral for them outside of Spotify. Maybe went viral on Instagram or wherever. But after they've been taken over, consistently you will find that all those songs have fairly high numbers in terms of streaming. So I think the labels understand how to break out music, because obviously they have such a huge
network of partners that
network
they
and
work with. Yeah.
understanding, all that stuff. So
Yeah.
I feel, but I think labels have also become very, very aware that there is this whole thing about, I can't be evil now. I can't take too much of, I can't bite
I
more than
don't
that I can chew.
entirely agree, Vijay, but that's a conversation for that's an offline chat we'll have.
Yeah, no, okay. So, personally, whatever whatever information we have from some of our independent artists who go out there and talk to labels, the way I see it is that if there is significant amount of investment from the label side, right, then there is bound to be them asking for their pound of flesh, right? But what I feel is there are still conversations happening where there is a label interaction, where there is not a lot of investment, and there is not a lot of pound of flesh also going. So that part would have never happened, say 4-5 years back. So it was like a binary thing. Either you're in and I take all your copyright, you're locked in for me for life, or don't come to us, right? So those middle conversations today have also opened up. While
Yeah.
there continue to be conversations on the edge of the spectrum where they will take copyright and take it for 5 years, 10 years, or whatever. But that middle conversation will say, okay, fine, we are willing to work with you. We will take a bit of of what we deserve, but
Yeah.
also we are not going to bet the farm on you also. So those
Correct.
conversations, those type of conversations didn't happen, I would say, 5 years earlier.
True. Like, in fact, like from what I've seen, excluding the major labels, because major labels, almost all of them, without exception, take all rights for perpetuity. And there is obviously the whole concept of recoupment. And of course, the label is going to be promoting that song a lot more because they own all rights. So even if the song is seeing that many streams or so much more streams, it's not like the artist is really seeing anything out of it in terms of revenue. In terms of popularity, maybe, but more often than not, if it's a 360-degree deal, then the label is also controlling revenues that they earn from live performances and like sync deals and everything. So it's I think it's a trade-off at the end of the day.
Yeah, sure,
If
sure.
if the record deal itself is like limited to a certain number of years, it's still, I think, doable. But obviously the rights go in perpetuity to the label. But there are a lot of indie labels, who are doing, like you said, there's a fair amount of investment, but it's not like they're pumping hard, but it's fair enough that the artist is able to like retain a certain amount of rights. Some of them even retain all publishing, and they seem to be working out really well for each other. So I think those deals might be growing in number, and I feel that a lot of independent record labels are like looking at finding that right formula and like cracking that formula and getting that right and getting more artists on board. Like, I mean, I think Pagal Hai Na is an example. Azadi was another example. So I think these are all, without being affiliated with a major, I think they're still doing pretty good work that way.
So I agree with you, and I think what needs to happen though is that which is very predominant in the West is that the intensity of consumption and the propensity to pay,
Correct.
once that in first for music consumption, once that
Absolutely. Yeah.
increases, right,
Yeah. Yeah.
what happens is then you can sustain or you can recoup money just through streaming, right?
Yeah. For
And
sure.
smaller labels can take that punt. Today, what is happening, we still feel for newer artists, the ability to recoup purely from streaming
Oh, it's
is
very
not
hard.
as much, is very
Yeah.
hard.
Very
So
hard. Yeah.
eventually, what is happening is that these labels end up doing artist management services and start looking at recouping from like a 360-degree level.
Yeah.
So whether it's gigs or sync or whatever, that kind of thing, right? Because
Yeah.
I mean, it's a business decision, and
Correct.
in that way,
It's
they
not
are
like
they are modeled around like a label, right? So they will, but their logic would be that okay, we will own the rights or we will have the right to exploit your work till we recoup our money, right?
correct.
But if we are not recouping it through a couple of uh, like couple of channels, then we will open up other channels to see if we can recoup more, right? So, like Azadi, for example, maybe started out as a record label, but they had to do live events. They had to do
Yeah.
some
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
branded
Yeah.
stuff because
Yeah.
they have to recoup their money, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think it's very similar, but the ethos is very different.
Yeah. Exactly. Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's so much to discuss, and I honestly feel the Indian music industry specifically has just like there's been so much of change in the last 5 years, and even and I'm saying like I've been working as a lawyer for about 16 years now, and the last 7 I've focused on like media and entertainment. I have seen so much change in the last 7 years alone. So I just wanted to ask you, like, is there any what are the changes that you have seen which have like stood out to you, like anything which you're paying attention to closely, or like something which you felt was like game changing,
Oh, well,
especially in the indie scene?
so I mean, I think we've just seen like a massive explosion of people coming out and putting music, really, right?
Yeah,
And
especially in the
that is
last three
just,
years, I feel.
yeah, that has just
Yeah,
exploded. And
yeah,
I still feel that we've barely scratched the surface, given
seriously, yeah.
the 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 dialects, the languages that this country speaks, the population
Mm,
that we have,
mm,
and the kind of music genres that we have. I think we've
mm,
still scratched the surface in terms of the amount of music that could come out from this country, right?
mm, mm,
So I
mm.
think that sheer volume is definitely sort of amazing.
Yeah,
Second, I think been pleasantly surprised with the way, say, hip hop is growing as just a genre, right? It's sort of increasing practically on a month-on-month basis in terms of the kind of music, the number of artists and things like that. So hip hop is a huge segment that has really blown up, really, right?
yeah,
That way.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I think, in general, I feel that artists today are more experimentative, right, about
yeah,
their music.
yeah.
Of course, uh, some of them are still, I would say, a lot of the musicians, I would say, I don't know what the percentage is, but
Mm.
they still come with from well-to-do families, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah,
musicians are who are taking risks
yeah,
are people who have that backing. But I
yeah.
think that also is a good thing because these are the people who are breaking boundaries, and then
Correct.
that will probably pave the path for the next
Yeah,
generation of musicians to say, okay, no, somebody did this. Now, I don't
exactly.
think it really matters
Yeah.
that person had the financial cushioning to do it,
Mm,
because the way I look at it is that if you have a financial cushioning, then you should take that risk, right? Because uh,
mm.
it's better that you take that risk and see if that risks pan out or not, really,
Pan out
right?
or not, yeah. Especially if you're talented.
Exactly, yeah. So I think those are some positive things that we've seen. On the
Mm.
on the negative thing, I feel uh, people have become a little bit more frivolous towards releasing music because
Mm.
everybody thinks they are a musician, in that sense. Because as long as you have an access to a computer and some software, you can make some music.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think there is this general tendency to copy the trend. So
Mm.
suddenly, like for example, like lo-fi has become like
Oh
a
my
massive trend,
God.
right?
Yeah,
So I just feel that you could get buried. So if you
yeah,
want to do lo-fi, for example, today, right,
yeah,
it's so difficult to break out, you know.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I just feel that the maturity in terms of standing for your own music, finding your own sound, I think
Mm.
those journeys are still to come to in India. That's why,
True. Yeah.
and and I think we will see far more engaged musicians coming in the future
Mm.
than what we've seen today.
True. Because like you said, I think this whole, this concept of following this formula driven singer songwriter, sad boy with an acoustic guitar
Hmm.
vibe.
Hmm.
It's like, I'm just like, enough. We need more artists. We need bands. And if you were to ask me who are the bands, the only bands that I can think of are like F16s and Scratton. These are all people who've been there for like 10 years. And obviously, like, I'm not even like talking about like a Parikrama or a Pentagram now, because those are like, the OGs. But
Yeah.
you if you look around you, there are very few new bands that are coming out. Like, it's a maximum like two people who will come together, and they
Hmm.
have like and it'll be an electronic duo. So
Hmm.
that whole thing, like you said, that finding their sound and
Hmm.
putting out music not just because it kind of like suits a certain narrative or it suits a certain formula. I think, yeah,
Hmm.
that hopefully we'll see more people experiment, like you said. And I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, I'm also, I was like, speaking to my nieces and my nephew, and we were talking about like career options, and I was just like, today you do have the option of becoming a musician, because it's not as shocking as it was like maybe 10 years or 15 years ago.
Hmm.
But again, like, how, to what extent can you take that risk? And someone also mentioned about how becoming a musician, or the option to become a musician, is a very privileged one, which I agree to a certain extent. But
Hmm.
I think if you have the talent, maybe you will be able to break out regardless of what your economic situation is. And we've seen that, and especially in hip hop for that matter.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So that I'm glad that has, like, we've kind of seen a big change on that front. So and I think our industry specifically, and especially having like spoken to people who are in the industry in the US and the UK, and they're like all eyes on India right now. So like whether it's
Hmm. Hmm.
Spotify and like, whether they're looking at it as a market that is a legit market for consumption and for creation as well, which is great. So,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
even though I think, I know COVID was like hard for a lot of people, but I'm grateful that it kind of, brought the spotlight on the independent artist community, because they were the ones who were creating and putting out content, and suddenly there was no film music, no new music to listen to, no new film content to like consume. And
Absolutely.
so like, and that's great. And I was very like thrilled when that happened, because it just meant that we're looking at actually building a sustainable ecosystem for independent artists in India. And
Hmm.
all the services that we're looking at, whether it's distribution, whether it's streaming, everyone is paying attention to the Indian market, which is good.
Yeah, and I think see, I look at my daughter; she's 14,
Mm.
the biggest advantage with this generation is that uh, their first point of music discovery is not the movies, right? It
Yes.
is
Yeah.
it is a
No longer,
Spotify.
at least. Yeah, it is a
Like
Spotify.
the kind of music my daughter listens to is
Yeah.
just unbelievable in terms of the breadth, really. And
Uh,
she's
uh.
all discovered it on Spotify. She's not
That's
discovered it
amazing.
through through like OTT
Film.
or through
Yeah.
film
Yeah.
or whatever, right? Or through
Yeah.
friends. Friends, of course, a little bit here and there,
And
but
maybe not even radio, no? I mean,
no, zero radio. She doesn't listen to
yeah.
radio at all, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But she consumes like we were just comparing notes on our Spotify rap, and she consumes 4 times the amount of music that I do.
Wow.
And so I'm stunned by the amount of music this generation consumes, really,
This
right?
is great.
Because
Yeah.
it's just ambient to them, you know.
Yeah.
So and this again, I don't know if it's a case in point, but this generation also is far more, uh, like an artist means a lot to them,
Mm, mm, mm,
apart from their music, what they stand for, all of
mm,
that goes into their affiliation to artists, and
mm,
they're willing to, stretch themselves to be able to, know more about the artist or go for a concert or pay for it and things like that, really.
mm,
So I feel that the whole artist to fan bit from this generation onwards,
mm.
we will see a shift of what, let's say, the West has seen for a few years. Like, people have been crazy about
Yeah.
their artists. People would travel cities to go and see their
Yeah.
favorite band perform, all that kind of stuff. I think that
Yeah.
will come to this new generation. They will actually do that. They will might go to a Jaipur and listen to an artist if they want to listen to it. That kind of a
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. But that brings me to this whole. We were also discussing, like, when Lola India announced the lineup and
Hmm,
the
hmm,
ticket prices,
hmm,
I basically put out a story saying that, that's great. I'm really happy for all the independent artists who are performing. Like, honestly, some of them are friends as well. But
hmm,
I was just wondering, like, if you're willing to pay like 7,000 and 8,000 to like watch all these international artists, why aren't you willing to watch your local artists as well? So this whole conversation about, um, independent artists who are from India not getting as much attention. Like, you listen to English music, but this is English music by someone who's from India. Why isn't that as valuable as, like someone like a Taylor Swift or a Justin Bieber or an Imagine Dragons? So
hmm.
that conversation is also, I think, people are like looking at it and saying, "Oh yeah, that's true." Isn't it's like some inherent, I don't know, racism that's coming in music as well. But the whole concept of, I don't want to call it regional music, but I mean, since that's been classified, it's been used as an official term. But you
Hmm.
have that whole the diversity that we have in India also comes from that. The fact that you have English is technically not our native tongue, but to most of us, we think in the language. But if you're looking at say bands from, like you mentioned, Jaipur, or someone from Kerala, or someone from Tamil Nadu, who's, actually sing and create music in their own languages. How much of the generation today is actually willing to listen to those bands who actually, sing and create music in their regional languages? And I think
So
that is like another topic altogether, but that's also there as an issue.
no, but personally, if you ask me, I think there are enough examples of bands which have been able to, claim a good fan base and wanting to come
Yeah.
and listen to them. Like, you think,
Yeah.
look at bands like Thaikudam Bridge or
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Agam or Chai Met Toast, Local Train. All of
Mm.
these are bands which are like Pratik Kuhad, Ritviz, Nuclear. I mean,
Mm.
you can like pull out a lot more. I mean, look at the Divine concert that happened recently. It was an amazing
Mm.
show. So I
No,
think
actually,
there
okay.
is
Let me just clarify. I'm not talking about Hindi, by the way. I'm
no
talking
okay.
about like other regional languages.
Okay, so now I'm yeah,
Yeah.
so I agree with you. I know where you're going.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just feel that I mean, yeah, it's a valid point you make that yes, there are a lot of artists who may not find that audience willing to pay only for them,
Mm.
and they might always be like a side act, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I just feel some of those artists also have not been able to come to a point of, let's say, a Chai Mein Toast or a Thaikudam Bridge or whatever, to be
Mm.
able to stand on their own feet and say, get people to pay 500 bucks, 1,000 rupees to come and watch them live, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think see, but I am very optimistic about how things will evolve over the next 5, 10 years in India because I think,
Same here. Same here.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think there are people who believe now that the music industry is a fairly good industry to invest in, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully, I think we'll see far more catalyst models, like
For
whether it's
sure.
festivals, venues,
Yeah.
whatever. I think we definitely will see a lot more of it coming in India for sure.
Yeah. And I think we are in a very good space right now, in the sense, like, I think India also,
Mm.
and with the kind of artists and the kind of talent we have, because there's no dearth of talent. And I feel that now, with all, for whatever it's worth, the kind of attention that we're getting as a country will hopefully like have like its fair share of good attention as well, with the kind of artists that we are generating. And I think Pratik Kuhad's crossover itself was like a big deal. The fact that
Yeah.
he appeared on Obama's playlists, and
Mm.
everyone was
Mm.
just like, who's this guy? And
Mm.
that
Mm.
itself, I think, kind of pushed a lot more attention towards the indie scene. And a lot of people are like,
Mm.
oh yeah, we do have artists who are exceptionally good, maybe perhaps even more talented than the ones that we follow who are like from the US or other places.
Mm.
So
Mm.
that's
Mm.
so that's I think time will tell, and I feel like we're heading in the right direction. So
Mm.
that brings me to what what is up with Okay Listen now? Like, what direction is the company headed to? I know that in 2021 you had like a very interesting partnership with the Gramophone, where you did something for like music for a cause. So could
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
tell us a little about that, and also what you
No, I
have in
think
mind for Okay
so.
Listen
The
next?
gramophone point came at I mean, so like you said, COVID was like I mean, we
Yeah.
were grateful to be extremely busy during COVID, because
Mm, mm.
we had like a crazy amount of people coming to us and releasing music, right? So I think the
Yeah.
COVID years were our most busiest years, actually, if I look back. And
Oh, wow.
the gramophone thing came out because we just wanted to figure out a way to give back.
Mm,
And we reached out to a couple of artists saying, hey, look, why don't you ask your fans to pay to
mm,
listen to you, like an intimate session with you?
mm,
And, let's donate some of that money to charity, really, right?
mm, mm, mm,
And some of the artists happily agreed, and it
mm,
was a time when people, I mean, it sort of fitted the bill. So Gramophone was um, a point wherein it was like real time, high quality audio streaming, as
mm,
such.
mm, mm,
Um, and for us, it was also an experiment to figure out what else can we do to really
mm,
help artists make more money, right? So,
mm,
so one of the things that we are starting to work on, and hopefully we'll be able to talk about it more as we go along, is
mm.
see, I would say 5 years back, 6 years back, distribution was something that was the first point of artists wanting to make money, really, right?
Correct. Correct. Yeah.
Now, I think that phase is is over. Like I said, distribution is now come to a point wherein it is nearly become commoditized. You know,
Yeah.
that ecosystem now everybody understands. There's nothing
Yeah.
new to
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
However, what we find is that artists are still struggling to make money, right?
Mm. Mm.
And part of it, of course, is the fact that there's a lot of entitlement among artists saying that
Mm.
I'm a creative person. I shouldn't be bothered about the business of music. You know, why should I be bothered,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we've had artists who are releasing their first track
Mm.
and there's a manager who's coordinating with us saying that I'm managing this artist and they're releasing their debut track. I'm like, dude, you shouldn't be managing this artist if he has no music release. I don't know what you're thinking, first of all, right?
Yeah.
So there is a little bit of entitlement. The other, of
Yeah.
course, is that there are not opportunities on a DIY level, right?
Mm.
Are not
Mm.
as many. So if today an artist wants to find gigs, he or she has to go and hustle, you know, in
Mm.
that gig
Mm.
economy, right? If they
Yeah.
want to do like a vinyl, for example, right, they have to
Mm.
figure out their own ecosystem. So
Mm.
I think the idea was for the live streaming bit that we tried out to say is that is there something that we can do to help the
Mm.
artist make more money, right?
Mm. Mm.
Now, of course, from a live streaming perspective, I think those days are gone, and you know
Yeah.
that vanity around audio or video live streaming has gone
Yeah.
away,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
But what I think the artists also realized is that there are opportunities wherein if I ask my fans to come and pay for something, then the
Mm.
fan is willing to do it. Question is, can I provide that value? Can I provide a very different experience to that fan?
Mm.
Right? Okay,
Mm.
audio streaming was one, and maybe it worked for what it worked, and but is there something else? You know, so
Yeah.
I think artists or some of the artists are also thinking about what else can I do to have my to deliver more value, you know, to my
Exactly. Yeah.
fans. So
Yeah.
I think we are now trying to that's I think that's what we want to move towards, a direction wherein we can start educating, you know, empowering artists to
Mm.
be able to look at multiple revenue sources, right?
Mm.
And looking at this whole artist to fan sort of relationship in a much stronger way, right?
Mm.
Because
Mm.
artists should look at it saying it's like a business. I
Yeah.
have to invest to get those returns, right? Just
Yeah.
because you make one song doesn't
Yeah.
mean that a million people will come and listen to you, right? You
Correct.
have to be able to engage, you have to you have to collaborate, you have to hustle, you have to
Yeah.
go and play at shows, you know, you have to figure out some of this stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
And if you can, then that's how you start building your audiences, you know. And I think that's where we believe the next growth will come into in the next 4 5 years, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So great. So I think so we can expect something interesting
Hopefully,
being
yeah.
announced. Yeah.
Fingers crossed. Yeah.
Fingers crossed. Looking forward to it, Vijay. But you've seen the independent scene. You've been such an important part of the history and what is happening right now as well. What would you like to say to the independent artist community today? Like, what do you think? What are your words of advice for them?
So see, I mean, firstly, I feel everybody needs to know the reality of the business, that it's tough, you know.
Yeah, it's tough.
It's
Yeah,
not an easy ride, right? So
yeah.
music today is at the same crossroads as what you will see in whether it's, you know, biscuits or OTT or
Yeah,
chips or whatever, right? If you look at it, any of these segments, there is
yeah.
enough variety, various price points, you
Mm,
know, and various levels of demand, right?
mm.
So it is going to be tough. So
Yeah.
I think it's a long haul for sure, right? And it could get longer
Mm,
primarily because there's so much of content coming out on a daily basis, right? So
absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's the way I look at whenever we talk to musicians and we tell them that, look, I think you need to be able to, you know, be able to commit it to this. And when we say commitment, we don't mean you need to be 100% into it. It could be a side hustle. That's fine. A lot of,
Mm,
I think nearly 90% of artists are doing music as a side hustle till they
mm,
figure it out. That's fine. But then you need
mm,
to be committed to that side hustle, right? So you
mm,
can't come and say, I have one track in mind and I'm going to take it easy for the next 6 months or 9 months. That's not how
Yeah,
it
no.
works, right?
Yeah.
You need to be sure that okay, you may hit a like a writer's block or a creative block, but then you need to work towards it. So it's a long haul. Be ready to get it to assume that it will take a little bit longer. But
Hmm.
I think the breadth of acceptance of music from consumers has really increased, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So even if you have a very finite, a very sort of specific niche sound, rest
Hmm.
assured that there will be 20, 50, 100 people who will appreciate it, right? And I think
Hmm.
that is the beauty of the industry today, right? That uh, every sort of slice of variety of music is
Hmm.
finding its audience, right? And
Yeah.
I think streaming stores are also doing their bit to be able to expose that to the right audience. And
Yeah.
therefore, we are seeing that nearly 60% of our artists, or
Hmm.
rather the streams, 60%
Hmm.
of streams of our artists are
Hmm.
coming through passive discovery, which means that the
Oh,
platform
yeah.
is instrumental in getting those streams. Now, whether it is through
Oh,
algorithms, whether it's through playlists, whatever it
yeah.
is, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
those ecosystems are working, and in their own magical way, they are helping you get your music to more audiences, right?
Hmm.
So I think you should continue that journey. And I think you will have, because it's harder, you will have to, I think musicians will have to look at other avenues of getting exposed to or
Hmm.
pushing your talent, pushing your music. So whether it's live, whether it's social media, whether it is, any other channel which allows you to get your music out, I think you
Hmm.
need to be prepared to be able to do it, in those areas also, right? I mean, you can't today say that I will just make music and I'll just put it up on streaming platforms and that's it,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? So I think
Yeah.
music is becoming a little bit more encompassing.
Yeah.
So it is hard, but for people who've stuck around, I think the rewards are also quite satisfying.
Yes, that's true. And I think you can see that in a lot of like the bands that have stayed true and continued doing and hustled really hard and been regular with the content that they've put out. And okay,
Yeah,
I don't want to say content because I know artists get very like touchy about calling their music content, but
yeah,
you know what I mean. So,
yeah.
but thank you. I mean, that I think that makes so much sense. And I think hopefully whoever's listening to this also relates to all these points and makes note of it because it is important. And if you are an artist today, you need to be in it for the long haul, and even if it's your side hustle, like Vijay rightly
Sure,
said.
sure. Yeah.
Okay, that brings us to the end of today's episode, which I think has been. I mean, I've had such a good time talking to you, Vijay, and I think every single time we have shared notes and we have like and when I've had this discussion with you, I've always felt the need to like actually take notes, and I hope everyone who's tuned in has also done the same thing. In fact, the other episode that I actually did this was with Amit Gurbaksini. So
Hmm.
and so this is great. I mean, and there's so much, and I know for a fact that there is so much more information, and there's like so much of knowledge that you have also like kind of collected and amassed over the last 20 years that you've been working in this industry as well. So which is
Right.
great, and thank you for taking time out, and despite not keeping too well to like actually have this conversation with me. So I really appreciate it. And if there's anyone who's interested in writing to you or to like talking or discussing about any of the stuff that we have discussed today, would you be open to having them reaching out to you?
Oh, yeah. First of all, thank you so much, Sandhya. I mean, it's always a pleasure to talk to somebody who is as invested in the topic as you are. So it's,
Thank
you
you.
come up with very interesting questions, and the questions actually sort of steer the quality of the conversation. So thank you so much. Yeah,
Thank
I'm
you. Thank
happy
you.
to help. I'm at Vijay at oklisten.com.
Great.
And on Twitter, my Twitter handle is Basrur, Basrur. So please feel free to reach out. These are the only two platforms I'm active on. I'm not active on any other social media platform, unfortunately. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. I mean, I will definitely be sharing your email address in the description as well. So if whoever's listening, if you want to write into Vijay and if you missed that, please check out the email in the description below. And thank you all for tuning in. I'm looking forward to hearing feedback about the episode. And once again, thank you so much, Vijay. This was a really great time chatting with you.
Thank you so much. The pleasure has been mine. Anyway, and good luck for a
Thank you.
great 2023.
Thank you. Thank you so
All
much.
right. Okay. Bye bye.